Okay, so now we get to the last part for this week where we're going to talk about how we actually measure crime and what it is that we are measuring. So, measuring, and that's what I've just said, so we'll keep going. So, measuring crime is broad. Have a think about the neighbourhood that you live in. Do you know how much crime's going on in your neighbourhood? Well, QPS has a lot of different sections. They collect data, and you can actually go onto the QPS site, Queensland Police Service, and look up where you live and see all the crime that's around you. And it breaks it down by what crime is happening, how many there are, if they've been solved. Okay, so there is a lot of way that data is collected, not just through the police. So we select the best data to examine a problem. And there are alternatives to operational data, and that's social surveys with crime victims. So go out and talk to people to find out what's going on. When you do doing criminology with MyESSA next trimester, you'll do a whole lot more on collecting data. So how do we measure crime? Well, when an activity or behaviour is legally defined, we can measure it, but first it needs to be detected or reported. How can we know if it's not reported? Have any of you ever had your identity stolen? Did you actually know? And how did you know? Okay, and did you report it to the police? I've just had my credit card compromised, so I am without my credit card at the moment because somebody either somehow picked the number or something like that and used it in Melbourne. And luckily, I checked my statement fairly quickly and saw it. But you know, $800+ that has come off my credit card through a fraud. I haven't reported it to the police, but I've reported it to the bank, and they have a team that looks after those things. So not all offences are reported and not all offenders are detected. And this is what we call the dark figure of crime. Because no one single source can tell us everything that we need to know. We need to use lots of different sources depending on what the problem is that we're trying to investigate. So here's a little graphic that shows a bit better about how it looks like. So the outside circle here in the one on the left is all crime that's committed. The second circle overlays but leaves a large number of crimes that are not reported. So as you go in further and further, you can see different circles overlaying. So you've got the police recorded crime, but look how small the circle is for police recorded crime compared to the overall circle of all crime that actually happens. This funnel that you can see on the right, rape, crime and punishment, you'll see different variations of this quite a bit through your study. But what it's basically saying is that the number of crime that actually happens or the number of rapes that are estimated to have happened each year in England and Wales, funnel that right down to how many people a year are convicted of rape. Okay, so you can see that even just from what they estimate to be happening to what is a police recorded crime is minuscule. So we don't know how much crime is actually happening out there. We can only go by the best statistics that we've got. So have a little think about these. Which of these offences do you think has a large or small dark figure and why? So burglary, motor vehicle theft, shop stealing, sexual assault, domestic violence, drug offences and fraud offences. What I think I might do is put this slide into our work for this Friday and we'll have a bit of a discussion. So you've got it to think about until Friday. Whether you think these types of crimes have a big or a small dark figure. So there's lots of reasons that people may not report crime. Okay, some of it is because they don't think the incident is serious enough. So if someone came back and found some really minor damage to their car, like bumped into it with another car but haven't left their number or something like that, but they just don't consider that the incident is serious enough to warrant being reported to the police. If the victim knew the offender, so quite often if it's a domestic violence type situation or a sexual assault, if the victim knows the offender, they don't want to get that person who maybe they're in a relationship with, they don't want to get them into trouble. They also could be very frightened of the person and realise what the consequences could be if they actually do report this person and the person finds out that they did it. Have a think about why someone would not report a sexual assault. Okay, some of the reasons I've just given you. So, you know, that can be what happens when people just don't report the crime. It can be because they're frightened or they don't want to get someone into trouble. Also, with the other side of it, with property type offences, it can actually be a minor crime that might not even be noticed for a long time. So if you get houses that have got lots and lots of knickknacks and things on bookcases and on benches, and if there's a lot of stuff in the house, things could go missing and they wouldn't even be noticed. So it could have been that it could have happened a long time ago, and it hasn't been reported because it is so minor. The third reason is there's nothing that the police could do. So if it is quite minor, they might believe, well, you know, there's no fingerprints being left. We don't even really know when this happened. So there's nothing that the police could probably actually do. So what's the point of wasting their time? And the victim feared reprisal. So I said this one before, actually, and victim knew the offender. The victim can be very, very frightened of the reprisal that might come upon them if they do report it. And this doesn't have to be someone that is in a relationship with the person. It could be someone who lives by themselves, is being victimised by a local gang or something like that, and they're just too frightened to report it because they fear what the reprisals might be from the gang. So this should make you question police statistics. Are they actually providing an accurate reflection of how much crime is out there? Now, I know that this is quite an old graph now. I have tried to find a more up-to-date one specifically showing this and haven't been able to. So we'll go with this one for just at the time being. So if you have a look at the types of crimes that are being reported, you can see some pretty astonishing statistics. So motor vehicle theft is always going to be high, but I can't understand how it's not at 100%. If you had your car stolen, surely you would report it. Break-in is high. The reason that break-ins are recorded or reported at a pretty high rate is simply because to claim things on insurance, you quite often need a police report number. So therefore, you'll find anything that's property related will always be reported to police fairly highly. Attempted break-in, so this might be a case of they think the police can do nothing. Physical assault, really low, not even 50%. And robbery, less than 40%. So people are getting robbed and not reporting it. However, in looking at all of this, police stats are the best that we've got at the moment. So administrative data, now we're looking a little bit more broadly than just at the police. So they're indicative of victim behaviour. They're indicative of police activity. So their investigation, detection and prosecution activity when it comes to crime. But remember, again, police can't do anything if it's not reported. Changes in legislation. So think about things that are being discussed a lot in the community. We see a lot of arrests going on at the time that it's being talked about. So new offences, such as when the one punch can kill legislation came through. You go around hitting people, you are well covered by assault, grievous bodily harm, but we now have a one punch specific offence. Okay, so we see a lot more arrests if something's new or being talked about a lot. Rarely are administrative data reflective of all the crime and or the victims and offenders. It's just not going to happen that we're going to cover everybody. But we do know from victim surveys that some crimes are more likely to be reported than others. Okay, I'm not ever going to test you on this, but I just need you to follow it down. So this is like a decision tree. So you're starting up at the top with the number of defendants that have been finalised in courts in 1 year. So 661,713. Then you can see the breakdown to the different courts. So children's courts, magistrates courts, and the higher courts. Then we can see whether they've been adjudicated or non-adjudicated, so they're still waiting to go through, or transferred to other courts. So in the magistrates' courts, they might be transferred to a higher court, and the children's court, they may be transferred to other courts as well if the children turn 18 during it or something like that. So when we now look at the ones that are adjudicated, whether they've been acquitted or proven guilty, 96%, 96%, 92% across the three courts. And then finally, we can have a look at how many got custodial orders and how many got non-custodial orders. So if you look at the magistrates court in the middle and follow that right down to the bottom, of the 96% that were proven guilty, which is over 500,000, so the vast bulk and majority of this 661 at the top, 91% of those went on to have non-custodial orders. Whereas in the higher courts, it's the other way around. 85% go on to have custodial orders and only 15% go on to have non-custodial orders, okay? And in the children's court, same as the magistrates court, 90% are given non-custodial orders. So the vast majority of people going through our criminal justice system are not being sent to prison. Okay, so crime's not generally comparable 100% across jurisdictions. So laws differ slightly in each state. What might be totally against the law here in Queensland might not be totally against the law in New South Wales or Victoria. So this data is called administrative data or operational data. And I need you to have a think about this because in Australia we have 9 jurisdictions. So we have every state and territory has their own police force, and then we have the Australian Federal Police. In the US, they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So for instance, in Texas, every town has its own police, then every county has its own police, and then you've got the Texas Rangers, which is the state body. That can lead to there being something like 300 different jurisdictions just in one state in America alone. So this is why criminals such as Ted Bundy and many others like him were able to get away with committing crimes for so long back in the 80s without it being noticed that the same sorts of crimes were going on in other places. Because when he committed a crime or two in one place, he'd just move across a state border or move to a different town. And back then, without computers, they didn't actually talk to each other enough. So they didn't actually know what was going on. This gives you the prevalence rates of assault published by 5 different sources. So if you have a look at that, that would be a little bit confusing. Okay, so prevalence rates of assault varying from 9 down to 0.8. That is a huge, huge difference. So as criminologists, as you are now becoming, or lawyers down the track, you need to be asking, where has this information come from? What's included in that information? Who did they ask to get it? Okay, so become conscious consumers of what you're seeing. So how do we interview offenders? Well, offenders are interviewed a lot. Researchers go into prisons all the time and interview offenders. And the reason that they're able to do that is because they're a captive audience. They can't leave, they can't go anywhere. The problem is, how do we always know that what they're telling us is the truth? So they can actually sit there and embellish the crimes that they've committed that have not been detected, or they might underreport what they've actually done because they don't want to tell you. So they are a captive audience, but we need to be a little bit careful in what they tell us because they may want to make themselves sound really, really tough. The other side of the coin is if you're the researcher or the interviewer and they start disclosing crime to you that they've committed, especially if it's really serious crime like murders, where does that leave you with confidentiality? So these are things that are always taken into account when interviewing offenders. So methods can inform theories of crime and criminality, and it can measure delinquency. So there's some of the questions there that that's supposed to say attack someone, not attach someone. Bad proofreading, Wendy, bad proofreading. Okay, think back to when you were in high school. Did you ever do a survey? Have you ever done a survey at all? Because if you have done a survey anywhere, you're now a statistic. Okay, and I'm sure some of you have done surveys online when you've been asked to complete surveys by companies that you've done business with. So you've become a statistic. Longitudinal studies, as I already explained to you, where we're following the same group over time. And features of persisters and desisters. So the persisters are those who continue to commit crime, start very early, keep on going, and your desisters are the ones that might do one or two really stupid things, lack of brain development, and then stop. Okay, so talking to those types of people can help to inform crime prevention initiatives. And by talking to offenders, it can capture more of the dark figure of crime. But again, you've just got to be really, really careful how much you can trust them to tell you the truth. So how do we survey in the field? Well, we can do what's called snowball sampling. So this is really good for, as it says, hidden populations such as the homeless who won't have listed telephone numbers and drug users. And how you could do this is quite often people who are conducting research, they have access to a little bit of money. So you find one drug user and you say, I'll give you $75 if you can introduce me to 3 of your friends who are also drug users. Okay, and as I'm sure you're all aware, the one thing that drug users want more than anything else is money to buy more drugs. There is an ethical issue in doing this, but it is a way that you can find more participants. So your one drug user introduces you to 3 more, you do the same thing with those 3, and then you've got 9, and so on and so on. Okay, same with homeless people, a little less problem with ethics giving them money because hopefully they would just use it for food. But snowball sampling is a really good way to find hidden populations or just to get a bigger pool of respondents for your research. Observational research. So this is what, as David Attenborough would put it, observing them in their natural habitat. This is where you're going to get out in the field and ask questions. So you might set yourself up on a little seat with a notepad and pen down in the valley on a Friday night or a Saturday night, or Cavill Mall for those down the coast, and watch what goes on. Just see if you can see any drug dealing. See what drug use in nightclubs you can see going on, prostitution, graffiti. And what do all of these have in common? Well, these are all street crimes, and we're going to talk about street crime in a couple of weeks. But these are all considered to be street crime. I saw something on Facebook this morning about a hooning problem on an industrial estate down the coast. So there are some really, really big problems out there. Okay, I want you to watch this video, and I can't play them here anymore because I figured out that if I do embed the videos into the presentations, that YouTube doesn't like that. So I want you to watch this and think about how we can get more accurate measures of crime. So some of the things that we could do would be anonymous reporting, where the victim and offender don't know each other, and never use the victim's name when investigating crime, so the offender doesn't know who reported them. Have another group that's able to deal with the offences. So if the offender is living on a university campus, for instance, you might get the college where they're living involved as well. If it is of a low enough level, there has been some incidences where colleges have been involved and haven't reported rapes to the police. Rapes is beyond their scope to be dealing with, but if it's lower level, then yes, they may be able to do with it. A neighbour or friend should be able to come forward and report crimes so that it's not wholly and solely up to the victim. Someone else can seek help on their behalf. Police and community services working together. This does happen a lot anyway, so it helps both groups to be able to find out what's going on and reach out to victims. Hospital records are really, really important. Royal Brisbane Hospital on the weekends, and I would say Gold Coast University as well, have a lot of people taken there that have been involved in street crimes, and that's all recorded and can be used towards getting accurate statistics of what's going on out there in the community, and encourage the public to use Crime Stoppers services to report victimless crimes such as drug offenders, prostitution, and property crime. But are they all victimless? Have a think about that, because we're going to talk about that in this trimester. Okay, that completes part 3 and the lecture. So I'll see you in tutorial for some activities and revision.